And really, to date, there has been a huge failure of imagination on this debate of women's liberation, where the inability of Islam's social laws to fit a secular liberal template has come to label Islam as being oppressive to the woman by default, rather than examining and comparing the impact of these different value systems, Islam on one hand and secular liberalism on the other, the impact of these upon the lives of women and upon society. And this is where the debate has to be had. So, while many today would claim that Islam is the enemy of women's rights, I would argue that it is the capitalist system that should be crowned with this uncoveted title. This toxic ideology that is driven by profit, whose moral compass is defined by the dollar sign, has and always will place securing profit over securing the dignity of women. It's constructed a multi-billion industry where women's bodies are the product and men's desires the client, in advertising, entertainment, pornography, the sex industry, essentially profiteering from selling sexism, consequently cheapening the status of women in society and contributing to problems such as discrimination, sexual harassment, violence and rape. According to the UK Home Office figures, this is in 2006-07, 2,000 women in the UK are raped every single week. In the US, a woman, these are official figures in the US Department, a woman is raped every minute. So really what we see today is the cheapening of women underneath the capitalist system. In contrast, Islam is an ideology that is not driven by the pursuit of profit, but rather a system that seeks material, moral, humanitarian and spiritual values for society in balance. It therefore prohibits the exploitation of women's beauty or body to sell any product or service. It also prohibits the sexualization of women or men because it views this as cheapening the view of one another, which leads to an obstacle in their interaction in society. Then there are those who claim Islam oppresses the woman because it denies her freedom of choice in her dress, her lifestyle, denies her sexual freedom in the relationships. But I would argue that these same liberal values come wrapped in their own set of problems. The promotion of sexual freedom has churned a culture of promiscuity, leading to an epidemic of teenage pregnancies, STDs, adultery, single parents, single mothers, and the breakdown of the family. Liberal values have therefore, in practice, even if not in theory, put the pursuing of individual desires over the well-being and the safety and the harmony of society. In contrast, Islam's approach to organizing society is not based upon securing sexual and liberal freedoms for individuals, but rather what is best for the safety and well-being of society overall. It recognizes the potential danger of allowing free relationships between the genders and understands that if you want strong families, if you want to protect the rights of children, if you want to protect the respect of women, you need strict laws and limits. So Islam's promotion of sexual chastity and its regulation of the relationship between men and women, this is not simply a personal virtue. This is something that aims to have a tangible impact upon the life of society and the family unit, and therefore on the lives of individuals. Then there are those, briefly, maybe we can expand on this in a discussion, there are those who say that Islam discriminates against the women because some of its laws are against the concept of gender equality. They say that this difference breeds disrespect of the woman. If this is the case, then what explains the high rate of these problems in Western societies? The high problems of rape, domestic violence, sexual harassment. What needs to be understood is that these problems rest upon the view of the woman in society. For example, discrimination. Do you know that the Equality and Human Rights Commission a couple of years ago reported that in the UK the number of women in senior positions had gone on the decline? It said that it would take a snail could crawl around the M25 9 times in the time that it would take to have equality in the judicial system. And he said it would take a snail to crawl the Great Wall of China before you have equality in politics. 200 years. You see, the respect of women depends upon the values in society. And when you degrade them by allowing the exploitation, what kind of view do you expect in the minds of men? And what kind of treatment, therefore, do you expect in the society? In Islam, the rights of citizenship for the woman in education, politics, economics are the same between men and women. But there are differences in certain social laws and family laws. But Islam doesn't allow the objectification and the cheapening of women that leads to these kind of problems. And therefore creates good relationships between men and women in society. Islam says the dignity of women is sacred and there's serious repercussions if it is belittled in any way. And finally, there are those who claim that only a secular system can guarantee the rights of women and not an Islamic one. So, is secularism the only path to women's liberation? Well, I believe that if you ask the tens of thousands of women in Bangladesh, driven to sell their bodies out of desperate poverty under a secular system, they would beg to differ. If you ask the hundreds of women in prison, beaten, raped under the secular systems of Egypt, Tunisia and Central Asia, they would beg to differ.
Okay, sorry, I think we've run out of time now.
So to conclude, I think we need to open this up to a different way of system for the Muslim world and women. So really, if you try and measure Islam by Western standards, it will never measure up, I'm telling you now. But if you look at Islam as to what kind of outcomes it achieves for society, then maybe it holds some credible solutions for society. So maybe today, it's time to take a deeper look at what's really behind the veil. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Nasreen, for your arguments as well. I'm now going to open the floor for the audience to actually interact, and if they have any questions, ask them. Unfortunately, the other mic isn't working, so you're going to have to stand up and make yourself heard. Anyone has any questions?
Sorry, I don't know your name, so before I start. Sue, nice to meet you. Firstly, I think your argument is very poor in the sense that what your argument was an un-Islamic argument. The reasons that you gave about the values of all these statistics and all these facts were very un-Islamic and going against according to the teaching of the Quran and the Sunnah. So I think that's a very cheap argument in the fact that it wasn't Islamic. It's not Islam oppressing women. It's something else, I think. And also, that was just a comment. But the question is I think the reason why you failed in your debate is just depicted in this room. These people, these women that are wearing their hijabs today, these headscarves, they have the right, they have the choice to wear the headscarf, yet they choose to do it at their own free will. And I think they're just examples of why you failed in this debate, and millions of other Muslims have actually embraced Islam, and I think that's the reason. But the question that I want to ask, really, sorry, I'm really bad at speaking. Anyway, the question that I really want to ask is, I think the debate was actually wrongly named, does Islam oppress women? I think it's, does the West oppress women? The reason why I'm saying that is, it's just all in the stats, because if you look at the UK, 1 in 5, in the NHS reports, 1 in 5 women are experiencing distress, they experience suicidal thoughts. 1 in 4 women are victims of domestic violence at homes. 80,000
Sorry, student, could you just wrap it up a bit?
Yeah, that's good. What I'm saying is, the point is, 80,000 people are in prostitution. So what I'm saying is, Why are you going against Islam when the West is much worse? I think that's the question.
Can't help feeling I'm never going to persuade you. Of course my arguments aren't Islamic, and I'm not promoting the bad effects of Christianity in the Western culture. Western culture and politics are also based on patriarchy. And I didn't single out Islam, as you might not have noticed. But, practically everything you said, I can't remember them all. It's a nonsense.
Yep.
Just taking up what, this issue of women and Muslim women and their role in public life. I wonder what it will take the West to break this idea that Muslim women are submissive creatures that have no political voice, non-educated. Sometimes I wish that we could have a revolution in the Muslim world where the West could see Muslim women leading the call for political change, using their voices, using Facebook, using Twitter to create change in the Muslim world. If only we could see that. Sometimes you wish you could see something like that, so the West could really understand that Muslim women are not uneducated, non-thinking, submissive creatures, but rather at the forefront of creating political change in the Muslim world and even in the West.
Can I just add something on one of the points you made? One of the points you made was, and has just been picked up, is whether Muslim men are involved in abusing women. I would guess that exactly the same proportion of Muslim men to white men abuse women of whatever colour. So, right, and both get those from.
What statistics?
Sorry, okay, can I take that? Okay, next question will be.
This comment is directed to Sue. A big part of your presentation was that you were saying that Islam is a patriarchal belief and it's misogynistic. But if we study the history of Islam, when Islam was revealed,
I didn't say it was necessarily just misogynistic. I said it's patriarchal, and patriarchy leads to misogynism and sexism.
Thanks very much. If we look at the history of Islam, when it was revealed, it completely revolutionized the rights of women at the time, and it elevated the status of the women. And they were granted rights that women in the West had to fight for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the right to vote, the right of ownership, of inheritance, to participate in politics, and that was actually against the public opinion of the time. So the Muslims at that time were actually criticised for giving women so many rights. And if we look at the role that women played in that society, they were accounting the rulers. The rulers were sending entire armies to protect their honor. So I think it's incorrect to say that Islam is patriarchal and looks down on women and hence leads to a misogynistic view of women.
Next question. Yeah.
Wait, my question is sort of an A and B question. A, have you read the Quran? And if so, is that where you are getting your views from?
No, I haven't read the Quran.
Thank you. Dr. Nasreen.
Yeah.
You mentioned in your argument, I think this is verbatim, that you said, in practice, if not in theory, that Western cultures and Western societies do tend to abuse women in different ways, as they accuse Islam of. It kind of contradicts the fact that you said Muslim countries that the predominant population is Muslim shouldn't be used an example to describe what Muslim countries or a Muslim state would look like. I think, from my perspective, I think the question that I want to know is, do you think that Islam can learn from secularism as much as secularism can learn from Islam? And if so, do you think that there is some sort of dialogue that needs to be had between the two?
I think the first point is the difference between using the West, using Britain and the US as an example of secularism, and using the Muslim world as a non-example of Islam. Okay? Because the West, Britain and the UK, represent secularism. They represent liberalism. Like Sue said that there has been a progress. There has been a secularization of British society. There has been a liberalization of British society. And I think this is important. Let's define what secularism actually is before we go further, because otherwise we'll never actually